Blimey. That was good, wasn't it? That was a little boy playing the tin whistle in the town of Shrewsbury in 1543. Lovely. Hello, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan, the show in which I aim to go through and analyse all of Shakespeare's sonnets. So far we've done 3, so today it would make sense to do 4, wouldn't it? I think it's important to just do a little recap of what sonnets 1, 2 and 3 have been about. Shouldn't take long because they're all about the same thing, which is Shakespeare telling a young man who we've named John that he is getting on a bit and he needs to have kids. And that really is the long and short of it. So let's look at 4. I have a little sneaking suspicion that it's going to be very similar to 1, 2 and 3. And my worry from here on in is that every one of Shakespeare's sonnets is going to be about exactly the same thing. And then my question is, why the hell do they have such importance in the literary world? You know? Anyway, that's enough of me rambling on. Let's have a listen to Sonnet 4. Sonnet 4. Unthrifty loveliness, why dost thou spend upon thyself thy beauty's legacy? Nature's bequest gives nothing, but doth lend, and being frank, she lends to those are free. Then, beauteous miser, why dost thou abuse the bounteous largesse given thee to give? Profitless usurer, why dost thou use so great a sum of sums, yet canst not live? For having traffic with thyself alone, thou of thyself thy sweet self dost deceive. Then how, when nature calls thee to be gone, what acceptable audit canst thou leave? Thy unused beauty must be tombed with thee, which, used, lives the executor to be. Well, Sonnet 4. I'm going to be straight with you here. 2 things. First thing was, Shakespeare dropped another racial slur, or one that sounded like a racial slur. So again, as in Sonnet 1, I swapped it out for a word that I felt comfortable saying. Not like anyone would have noticed, but I felt like I needed to say it. Secondly, I am reading these literally for the first time. So if it sounded like, when you were listening then, I didn't know what I was talking about, you'd be correct, because I had no idea what I was saying there. I was in deep, deep water. But that's what this podcast is all about, isn't it? So, let's break it down line by line, shall we? So, unthrifty loveliness, why dost thou spend upon thyself thy beauty's legacy? Loveliness here, I'm assuming, is John, right? Is the recipient of the sonnet, which sounds quite modern to me for some reason. I feel like I've been in a shop and someone has called me loveliness, or out and about, someone said, "Are you all right, loveliness?" but unthrifty loveliness. So unthrifty, sort of, sort of wasteful. So wasteful loveliness. You wasteful, lovely man. Why dost thou spend upon thyself thy beauty's legacy? So why, again, here we are again. It's, why are you not passing on your beauty, right? Why are you not having a kid? Again. I mean, give it a rest. Anyway, it's not for me to critique these sonnets particularly. It's just getting to the bottom of what he's talking about. So let's not hang about too much on that. Nature's bequest gives nothing, but doth lend, and being frank, she lends to those are free. So here he's saying, nature gives out good looks, right? And being frank, I love that. Let's just be frank for a second, shall we, John? For God's sake, look, I've been flowery, I've given you the flowery language, but let's just be frank. She lends to those are free, all right? I think we need to read the next line to sort of understand what this whole phrase means. So, then, beauteous miser, why dost thou abuse the bounteous largesse given thee to give? So it's basically saying, look, nature's given you all these good looks. And let's be honest, you're a miser. And you're actually abusing the gift that you've been given, nature's gift. Nature would be absolutely fuming at this. Don't tell nature about this, because nature's going to be very angry. Okay? Profitless usurer, why dost thou use so great a sum of sums, yet canst not live? So here he's sort of being compared, you're not profiting here. You're using up your life, or so great a sum of sums. So you're using up. Listen, you're using up a lot, all right, of whatever the hell Shakespeare means by use. But again, it's a waste. Like, you live in life, but you're not profiting, because profiting would mean having a kid. We've been through this. For having traffic with thyself alone, thou of thyself, thy sweet self, dost deceive. Now, I'm going to be honest here. I think Shakespeare lost his way a bit here. I think he was sort of scrabbling around trying to get Sonnet 4 together in time and just lost his way. Because thou of thyself, thy sweet self dost deceive. And what are you talking about there? Thou of thyself. He's not reading that back going, that's good writing, is he? He's not. It's poor. It's poor from Shakespeare. I don't know what that means. I don't think he knew what that means. But I think it's the same effect as the rest of the poem, isn't it? For having traffic with thyself alone, basically not having kids. Then he goes on to say, then how, when nature calls thee to be gone, what acceptable audit canst thou leave? So I told you nature would be angry, didn't I, earlier on? So now nature's come back, baby, and nature is going to kill you. I mean, it's dramatic, but nature will eventually take you, right? That's dying. Nature takes your life. And you won't have anything to leave behind, No kid. Shame on you. And then we come to the final couplet. Thy unused beauty must be tombed with thee, which, used, lives the executor to be. So your beauty will go with you, to the grave, and it won't have been passed on. Yet again, a final couplet that is very similar to Sonnets 1, 2 and 3, but rephrased, sort of, you're going to die, nature's going to take your life, and your good looks aren't going to be passed on to anyone. He's obsessed, isn't he? Get a grip. Right, let's give Sonnet 4 some context, shall we? But before we do, you will only be able to hear this context if you join my Patreon. I'm just kidding. I don't have a Patreon. Let's get on with the context. So if you remember, Sonnet 3 ended with Sir William Shakespeare. He's not Sir, but he should have been a Sir. Or maybe he was, he denied knighthood. Or was knighthood a thing then? We'll never know. We'll never know that. Anyway, if you remember, Shakespeare was dressed as Ben Jonson, the famous poet and writer. And he was in City Hall, and he'd taken out Sonnet 3, and he delivered Sonnet 3 to John. But John, of course, thought he was Ben Jonson. Actually, William Shakespeare's impression of Ben Jonson was remarkably good. So John went away thinking, God, what is going on here? Shakespeare's written me 2 sonnets. Ben Jonson's written me a 3rd. Well, no, but Ben Jonson's written a 1st, but it's actually Shakespeare's 3rd, but he doesn't know that. And he goes to bed at night and he's thinking, I didn't know that I needed a kid this much. And actually, have these two been, talking to each other? What's been going on? Meanwhile, across town, Shakespeare ripping off his moustache, his big Ben Jonson moustache, and his big Ben Jonson eyebrows. Because I think that Ben Jonson very famous for his eyebrows and moustache, I believe, and he was laughing to himself. Shakespeare was he's in his little writing room and he's going, I've got him this time. And Shakespeare's wife calls out, what are you laughing at, Bill? He said, don't worry. It's none of your business. And she says, oh, all right. I just thought you had a joke to tell me. And he said, I don't have a joke to tell you, all right? This isn't a comedy. This isn't Midsummer Night's Dream. An idea. A play called Midsummer Night's Dream. We'll put a pin in that. So Shakespeare's thinking to himself, what's next? I feel like I've grabbed John's attention now. 2 of the greatest poets and writers of their generation have written poems to John, asking him to have a kid. There's no ignoring that. But he thinks, I think a 4th sonnet would do the trick. But he couldn't deliver it as Ben Jonson because he thinks, that's done now. I've played Ben Jonson, and actually, if I meet John again, he'll have more questions to ask. But he has an idea. He thinks, what if I get Ben Jonson in on the plan? What if I actually convince Ben Jonson that John needs a kid? It's a very good idea, isn't it? So he quickly writes to Ben Jonson and says, listen, We've had our differences, and we are competitors in many ways. But have you thought that maybe, John? You know John. Have you thought that maybe John should have a kid? A week later, Shakespeare receives a letter back from Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson says, by the way, I went to the Globe the other day and I really enjoyed Twelfth Night. I thought it was actually really good. I thought the characters were really well rounded, and I just wanted to let you know. Anyway, yes, I do know John, and it's funny you say that because I've often thought it would be nice if John had some kids, because he's very good looking, isn't he? And I just thought, what a waste for him not to have kids. Long story short, they agree to meet at, guess where? The Nag's Head. 2 pints of mead later, William Shakespeare and Ben Jonson agree to confront John. William says, look, listen, last night I wrote Sonnet 4 and I think it's perfect. It's perfect. And Ben says, well, do you want me to make some revisions to it? And Shakespeare says, no, don't worry about that. This is very good. It's very good. And Ben says, all right, but okay, well, okay. And Shakespeare says, let's send a letter to John and ask him to meet us in Regent's Park. And Ben says, perfect. See you then. And Shakespeare said, well, I haven't told you the date. I haven't told you the date that we're going to meet him. Ben says, oh yeah, okay, what is it? And Shakespeare says, well, next Wednesday. And Ben says, all right then, thanks. So they agree to meet at Regent's Park next Wednesday, where they will read in unison Sonnet 4 to John. Wednesday comes about. It's raining, but of course umbrellas weren't invented then. So Shakespeare and Jonson stood under a big willow tree, awaiting John's arrival. Eventually, John trudges up the muddy path, waves at Ben and Bill. Bill and Ben. Bill and Ben! Waves at Bill and Ben. And sorry, my reaction was Bill and Ben. I don't know if you haven't seen it, if you're maybe international audience. Bill and Ben were Flower Pot Men. It was a sort of a children's TV show. But of course, that's many years after this story. But I do believe Bill and Ben the Flower Pot Men were based on Bill Shakespeare and of course Ben Jonson. So that's an interesting fact for you to take away. Anyway, I digress. They meet and John says, okay, look, I know you both want me to have a kid, and I'm really unsure. I don't have a partner. I mean, who am I going to have this kid with? And Shakespeare says, just shh. Just listen. And he pulls out Sonnet 4 from his back pocket. He looks over at Ben Jonson and nods. Ben Jonson nods back and they read in unison. Sonnet 4. Oh, lovely wasteful John, why don't you have a nice kid, eh? Nature gave you those gorgeous looks and she might be a bit annoyed if you don't pass them on. You won't profit in life if you don't have a child. You're deceiving your sweet, sexy self. Remember when I talked about nature earlier? She will murder you eventually, and you won't have had a kid, and she'll be really pissed off at you. your sad little body will go to the grave without ever having had a kid, which would be really bad. Wow. Another corker from William Shakespeare. Sonnet 4. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next week for, let's maybe look at Sonnet 5. Have a lovely time. Bye.